Our senior politics editor, Chris Bedford, went to the White House earlier today for a press briefing by White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt, who had a special guest. That guest is Patty Morin. Now, she's the mother of Rachel Morin, who left behind 5 children after she was murdered and raped by an illegal immigrant from El Salvador. And Leavitt began the press briefing by highlighting some of the crimes committed by Kilmar Garcia. He's an illegal immigrant and an MS-13 gang member who was deported by the Trump administration.
The court ordered that the respondent committed the following acts of abuse. Once in May of 2021, assault in any degree. And on May 4th of 2021, he punched and scratched his wife, ripped off her shirt, and grabbed and bruised her. This is from a court in Maryland. So not only are Democrats rushing to defend an illegal criminal foreign terrorist gang member, but also an apparent woman beater.
We have Chris Bedford joining us now on the phone, fresh off of that press briefing. So, Chris, what was the mood in the room like there at the White House this afternoon?
Oh, it was obviously, actually in accordance with, as it ought to be, extremely somber. People hadn't known what to expect. We got the guilty verdict for Rachel Morin's murderer today, which was a great vindication. I mean, in a country, in a state, Maryland, by the way. I live right next to Maryland, used to live in Maryland, where illegal immigrant gangs have operated with impunity since I was in college, which every day seems to get longer and longer ago. To actually get that guilty verdict and get that justice served, we'll see what the sentencing is, excellent news. So the reporters weren't sure what to expect. They weren't sure if the president was going to come out. They weren't sure if a cabinet secretary, Elon Musk, whoever knows. And this was, I think, an important lesson for them. Now, I was hoping to get in the question, but I understand that Mrs. Morin didn't want to. It's a fragile state for someone who didn't choose public life, had this awful mission hoisted upon her while going through such incredible pain. And it was a good thing to see for them, I think, because we've talked about Senator Chris Van Hollen, the Maryland Democratic senator who didn't reach out personally or make any kind of real personal overtures to the Morin family and the 5 children who no longer have a mother, who didn't. He issued a press release today saying that he's happy about the guilty verdict and justice served, but it's very quiet. And then is seen this morning at Dulles Airport flying down to try and secure the release of an El Salvadorian citizen here in the United States illegally, who a court has found on 2 different counts is affiliated with MS-13. These reporters are guilty of this sort of thing also, and that's what I would have asked about. It's not just these Democrats. Half the time, the Democrats are following the people who enable them. And the stories that the news media chooses to tell are the ones of illegal immigrants and poor gangbangers. And look at these poor people from other countries, from distant lands. Yeah, that's be a noble thing if you want to commit your life to it, but they don't seem to care about their neighbors in very nearby Maryland. I could walk to Maryland where I am at the White House right now. They don't seem to care about the people in Northern Virginia, which is overrun with gangs, or the people along the southern border, or the people in Chicago, or the people in New York, and those stories. So to have them have to sit there, and they did so respectfully, quietly, and listen to the impact of these policies that make them feel good. They feel the reason why they push this insane stuff is it makes them feel good to say, America's good. I'm wealthy. I'm successful. This stuff doesn't reach out. This stuff doesn't impact me. It doesn't hurt my children. And that's probably what the Morins may have thought. It doesn't impact my children. And then one day, that incredible violence and evil was visited upon this young mother in a place where she didn't expect it. And suddenly it becomes very real to them. So I hope that the news media is able to listen to that story and get just a glimmer of remorse and say, why are we choosing the stories that we do to tell? Why are these the narratives that we wish to spin? Why is this the way that we choose to define what is going on in this country, what is happening to our country, what is happening to our neighbors, what is happening to innocent people, what is happening to our communities? And maybe they come to the conclusion that they want to do it anyways. Maybe they say, oh, you know what, I can sleep well on a pile of money, I don't care. But I hope maybe there's at least one person or two people, hopefully a lot more, in that room today who heard that story and said, I want to serve the voiceless. I want to serve those people who've been ignored. I want to serve my neighbors, and I want to serve my family. And I want to tell these stories, even if it makes the Democrats uncomfortable.
Chris, I want to run through. We want to run through some clips and get your reaction, having been there for this incredible moment. Levitt also called out the Democratic senator, of course, for supporting Garcia's return. Let's take a listen to that.
It's appalling and sad that Senator Van Hollen and the Democrats applauding his trip to El Salvador today are incapable of having any shred of common sense or empathy for their own constituents and our citizens. Nobody knows this more than the woman standing to my right, Patty Morin, whose beautiful daughter Rachel was brutally maimed and murdered at the hands of an illegal alien in August of 2023. Patty no longer has her daughter because of the failed Democrat Party's open border, and these are policies that President Trump is bringing an end to. Patty should not have to be here today, but she is, and we are grateful and we are honored for her willingness and her request to share her powerful story with the world. Thank you, Patty.
Chris, your thoughts?
Yeah, I wrote about this for the Beltway Brief this morning. The focus of the Democrats. We saw after President Trump won the first time, and then saw again after he won the second time, these fake moments of inflection. The question, the young pope question, who have we forgotten? Who are the people who we're not serving? Why is the American working class, black, white, and Hispanic, turning against us? Why are we only speaking to college-educated white women? Why are we failing to gain traction? And Chris Van Hollen's mission and his statement they scream the answer, because they're focusing on people who are not their constituents. They're focusing on people who are not their citizens. They're focusing on this really awful obsession that they have with this moral do-goodism, which has completely betrayed actual morality and actual common sense. They're standing for things that the American people have completely and soundly rejected, despite the incredibly generous nature of the American people for centuries now. Generous, libertarian kind of mindset that has been live and let live mindset that has been taken advantage of by activists who have imported and facilitated and then defended illegal immigrants and illegal immigrant gangs and criminal illegal immigrants in our country for years and years and years. And it's taken advantage of a lot of people. Chris Van Hollen is just a perfect solution there of where the Democrats are really, really missing the ball, and why this time in the wilderness is so thoroughly deserved. And it's also a sad sign that there are no lessons learned whatsoever.
Yeah, Chris, I want to get your take, because no American mother should ever have to go through this, because we see Patty Morin go through in detail how her daughter was gruesomely murdered. Let's take a listen.
He attacked her. He dragged her 150 feet, blood gushing from her head. It left a 150-foot trail of her blood to the culverts, where he picked her up, he threw her against the wall of the tunnel, and he raped her. But before he did that, he stopped on that trail, and rocks, still stained with her blood, he used them to hammer her head against those rocks. They say at least 20 times they could count the cuts in her head. They said that when they did the autopsy, and I've seen the pictures, there's a 6-inch square in the back of her head where the skull is shattered the way that you would crush an eggshell.
I mean, nobody should ever have to hear that. detailed about their own daughter, have to go up there and speak about her own daughter in this regard. So, Chris, what was your lasting takeaway from this press conference today?
Gosh, I think my first takeaway was, I guess, vulnerably human. It was selfish. It was, oh my gosh, I couldn't imagine this happening to my family. I couldn't imagine, where your heart would go if this happened to your children. And he was so stoic. It's like I said, she's not a public figure. Talking to some White House communications people shortly before, the guest was a surprise, but I was able to get a sneak peek by simply badgering them. Just a few moments before she walked into the room. And they said, we might go with questions or might not. It's really going to depend on how she's doing because, it's hard enough to talk about a family member who's elderly. It's hard enough to talk about a parent, to eulogize them at your funeral. But to go into those details about a child who, by all accounts, should outlive the parents, it was incredibly brave. And she answered on the way out the door the question that I was intending to ask, I was talking about earlier. She said where she felt at the podium, where she felt betrayed by those people, those politicians who just don't seem to give a damn in Maryland and in Washington and all around the country. But she said out the door, please tell the story. And it drew me back to so many different of the most eloquent storytellers, and not stories, but truth tellers, the people who I've talked to, victims advocates over the years, whether they're Boer farmers in South Africa or my neighbors in Maryland, people who are able to walk out and they have that moral high ground and that badge of authenticity, not because of the colors, because of their religion, or not because of the political party, but because of their actual lived experience, which is something we always talk about, and especially in culture, the actual things that they have gone through, the actual things that they have seen, and the poise and dignity that they maintain while talking about the most awful things that can happen to you. Her line about how you can't explain to your husband or anyone else what it's like the first time you hear a baby kick, how you know what the gender of sex is, and then how you can't explain to anyone what it's like when that's taken away. That's why you ended up seeing my old colleague from the Caller, CNN's Caitlin Collins, say, thank you for coming. And that was just the only comment. The press, when she left, the press room was silent. There wasn't the usual hubbub. There wasn't the yelling of questions. There wasn't, and by the way, I think we would have seen that in the first term. Questions about the trade war, questions about the economy, questions about the stock market. There was just silence. And that was, that alone was witness to the testimony that she gave.